LLC, or, well, you can't be an LLC as an attorney in California, but not under a professional limited liability company, not under a professional corporation, not under a corporation of any kind, which is interesting to me. And again, could be a professional corporation, could be a corporation, is not a entity, which is so odd to me. But these could have all been done with one, but he's going to be personally responsible for all of these debts. There is no corporation there. It's just him. So at the end of the day, once they settle out the personal stuff, if there is anything, and I don't think there will be, but if there is anything left, the other bankruptcy will have a crack at those assets too. There's no division there. Be very interesting to see what all the finances look like. But in the business bankruptcy, the trustee has said it's going to take at least 6 months to get cracking on those, because they have to do the investigation. They've hired accountants, and now they have to start to put together where all the money has gone and try to track it down and figure out what's outstanding. And that's going to include if the law firm is owed any debts, if the law firm has made any loans, and then the ability to either go track those loans down and have them paid back in court, or sue people over those outstanding balances. So January 13th, the bankruptcy is granted for both the business and the personal. The next day, Tom Girardi's brother, Robert Girardi, goes to court and is like, yo, I would like to be the guardian ad litem for my brother. I would like an opportunity to respond to the bankruptcy. And the court's like, you missed the deadline. Too bad, so sad. We are now officially in bankruptcy. A bankruptcy stay is being issued across all of the other proceedings. That includes the divorce. That includes everything going on in Illinois. Everything stops while the bankruptcy gets resolved. Bankruptcy! It's like that scene out of The Office where Michael Scott's just like, I declare bankruptcy! Everything stops because there is a bankruptcy. All of the other proceedings. On February 1st, the temporary conservatorship is entered in the LA Superior Court, and Girardi's brother, who was not appointed as guardian ad litem in the bankruptcy court, is appointed as the temporary conservator, and that has since been extended through June 30th, 2021. They stated that that was due to a medical emergency, but in filings from Tom Girardi's court-appointed attorney, he indicated that Girardi had eye surgery due to pressure in his eye and glaucoma. When I think medical emergency that warrants a conservatorship, that is not something that would come to mind. But we'll see. We'll get to the medical filings that we've seen in the conservatorship proceedings in a minute, because we'll get there. We'll get there. So that was the beginning of February that this temporary conservatorship was ordered. In February 23rd, 2021, there was a bankruptcy hearing regarding the real property. The court ordered the temporary conservator, Robert Girardi, to provide the keys to the Pasadena home, like the codes and things like that, to make the home accessible for showing. They are now getting the Pasadena home that we've seen on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills ready for sale. They've actually filed with the court to have a real estate broker appointed through Compass Realty, and they are getting this house ready to sell. That's
a couple of times.
When we get to the financials that have been filed, I will give you the estimate of the house. I think it's a big estimate for a Pasadena home, but we will see. It's a big estimate, but we'll get there. The court ordered that the debtor shall cooperate with maintaining the property, not communicating with brokers or buyers, that the utilities should be paid, and proof of payment must be submitted to the court, which is interesting because when we get to the property, well, we'll get to taxes. The state of California would like their money,
ladies taking advantage or took
financial
advantage
filings that are on record so far.
But
and the court made it
like
very clear that any failure to comply will result in eviction.
And so,
the
since he's
trustee
doing
in
it,
bankruptcy went to the court and was like, we can just evict him if we need to sell this house. And
at one point,
Robert Girardi, the brother, was like, no, don't evict him. We'll comply with
I'm
it.
Just going to follow this case.
Hopefully there won't be an eviction, but if the house goes into escrow, Tom Girardi will have 20 days notice to vacate based on what the
and we're studying dementia. We're listening to everything.
We get to the end of February, and there were rumors that Tom Girardi was going to be evicted, and it looked like he wasn't, based on the court documents, really cooperating through his brother, because he's not appearing in any of these proceedings. Now he's under a conservatorship. He doesn't have the right to make agreements, sign documents. He is stated to be incapable of doing those things. And if we want more discussion from me about conservatorship, see all of my content regarding Britney Spears, where we talk about her conservatorship. But this is not as unusual because this is an 81-year-old individual. There can be mental decline based on age and other factors. What's unusual here, because there are unusual circumstances here, but the unusual circumstances here more relate to the fact that up until just before this, Tom Girardi was still giving speeches and giving presentations and interviews, and was still negotiating with Edelson PC, who's actually filed papers in the conservatorship, but we'll talk about that, and was engaging with them in conversation. And the people who engaged with those conversations said there was no indication of any mental decline or issue. There was no rumblings of it, and that they had conversations with Tom Girardi that were not concerning. So that is the unusual circumstance here, is that this conservatorship and this diagnosis that we'll get to in a few minutes came under such unusual and consequential circumstances. Not that there had been rumblings for a while and that his family had been trying to do anything. This was like, so we're good, but now we're not good, now that we've got the court in Illinois asking for a criminal investigation. And the court in Illinois, and we didn't get into all of this, the court in Illinois had frozen Tom Girardi's assets. We didn't go through all of that because I went through all that in previous episodes, and that has kind of been unwound because now it's in bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy kind of takes over everything. So the asset freeze was lifted in Illinois so that the bankruptcy court could take over and do their thing. Either way, there were rumblings about him getting evicted. There's now an agreement for the house to be sold, so that is going to be underway, where the bankruptcy trustee is going to start selling off property, and other property too, not just the homes, but it will be art, collectibles, jewelry, all the things. I expect that in the next month, the month of April, we will see a lot of activity in that direction within the bankruptcy courts. So that gets us up to March 9th. And I posted about this on social. If you don't follow me on social media, and you are on social media, because if you're not on social media, I get it, because some platforms can feel very toxic and overwhelming. But if you do follow me on social media at the Emily D. Baker, or if you are on social media and don't follow me, you will have seen me posting about this because, girl, when this went down, I was like, oh, hey there, State Bar. Welcome to the conversation. So on March 9th, 2021, Girardi was ordered inactive and not eligible to practice law by the State Bar of California by way of like an administrative rule, because he's under a conservatorship. And when you're under a conservatorship, if you can't take care of yourself, you damn well can't practice law, because you don't have mental capacity to take care of yourself. You don't have mental capacity to be a practicing lawyer. I've seen questions and comments about what's going on with the Girardi Keys law firm. And at this point, the law firm is shuttered. It's folded. It's within the bankruptcy. So the existing clients are being, having their cases taken over by other attorneys that are having to make agreements with the bankruptcy trustee, because those are assets in the bankruptcy. And yes, it sounds cold to discuss individuals as assets, but it's their cases that are assets in the bankruptcy, because if Girardi Keys did work on these cases, they're entitled to some attorney's fees and costs when the cases settle, so that that amount should go into the bankruptcy to help pay the people who haven't recovered. So the attorney's fees will go into the bankruptcy court and then will go to the parties who have not been paid in the order that the bankruptcy court sets. That does not diminish what happens to the current clients' funds. They should actually get what they're entitled to after attorney's fees, costs, and what have you, because the split should come from the new attorney and the bankruptcy court. So if anyone's going to get a little bit less, it's either going to be the new attorney or the bankruptcy court, but should not be the individual that's settling their cases, because there are still ongoing cases, notably the Porter Ranch cases. So, speeding right along to March 10th, there is a report filed in the conservatorship case by Dr. Lavid indicating that, quote, dementia impairs his ability, his being Girardi, to understand the hearing and stating that Girardi suffers from Alzheimer's disease with late onset, and the report was based on a February 26, 2021 evaluation. Now, there have been other issues with this report. There have been questions raised by people objecting to the conservatorship, but we'll get there in a moment. On March 12th, the personal bankruptcy trustee, so the trustee in the personal bankruptcy case, filed a motion to approve a compromise between the trustee and the Ruigomez creditors, asking the court to approve a essentially compromise or settlement between them. The Ruigomez creditors, again, come from the PG&E case, and they have a lien of $11,747,245.95 that they are entitled to based on their awarded judgment that was never paid to them by Tom Girardi. And they have a perfected lien against all of his real and personal property. All the shit. All of it. If you sell anything, it goes to us up to $11,747,245.91. So the compromise stated that the sale of property will be distributed as follows. Real property liens senior to the Ruigomez liens, taxes arising from the sale, costs of the sale, administrative fees, and cost of the bankruptcy estate. So the bankruptcy is going to get paid, like the bankruptcy trustee is going to get paid, and then 80% of the balance to the Ruigomez creditors to be applied towards their claim. So costs, essentially, real property liens that are senior, that would be any lien that came before them or took superiority to them, including potentially a mortgage, potentially including another creditor. There's a footnote about that. We'll see what the court says about that if they approve this compromise, because this is a proposal. This is a, hey, we'd like to do this. And we'll see that there's objections to it in just a moment. But essentially costs, administrative fees, taxes, and then 80% of what's left goes to the Ruigomez creditors. 20% of what's left will be held by the trustee for other unsecured claimants in the bankruptcy estate. The Ruigomez creditors can still go after whatever property is attached or sold off with regard to Girardi Keys. So they have both opportunities to be made whole. They're not going to double dip, obviously, but they have two opportunities to be made whole to that $11,747,000 some odd dollars that they are owed. Also on March 12th, in the conservatorship, the state bar objected to the conservatorship and asked for a neutral medical review and an evidentiary hearing. Now, I have video breaking this down, but the state bar is like, hey, it's our job to protect the public. And I'm like, where you been? But where have you been? But where have you been? And it's interesting because this kind of came on the heels of the LA Times article. I think the timing might wholly be coincidental, but it was still funny. So the state bar is saying, could you please at least grant a neutral medical review and an evidentiary hearing? We object to you just placing him under conservatorship. And the state bar really said, we want an opportunity to go through the punishment proceedings under the state bar. He's under investigation. And this is the first time we've actually heard the state bar say he's under active investigation. In their filings, the state bar also said, hey, he was trying to negotiate with us up until this conservatorship happened, trying to work with us regarding this investigation. So very, very interesting document filed by the state bar asking for that neutral medical review and evidentiary hearing. I mean, it's been objected to, but we'll get there. On March 15th, the conservator, so the attorneys for Tom Girardi's brother, Robert Girardi, the conservator, filed a response to the state bar objection, saying that the state bar has no standing. Like, you don't go here. You can't bring a claim here. You have no interest here. GFO. Like, just get out. You can't do what you're trying to do. You don't have any right to come into court and object. Just out. Yeet. Yeet. Yes. I just did say, in the capacity or in the context of law, that the conservator or the attorney for the conservator wants to yeet the state bar out of the conservatorship proceeding. I said that. I stand by it. Y'all know what I mean. Or at least the millennials and Gen Z of you. I doubt any of you are Gen Z that are listening, but you get what I mean. The boomers, I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeet me, DM me. Yeet means throw. So in the response saying that the state bar doesn't even go here, the state bar doesn't have standing here, the state bar shouldn't be speaking up in this, they also said that the state bar's request goes against the purpose of conservatorship. Like, the conservatorship purpose is to protect the conservatee, Tom Girardi, and that the state bar is seeking to harm the conservatee, essentially, Tom Girardi. Like, they are seeking to punish him, but the goal of the conservatorship is to protect him, so they're asking for something that goes directly against the purpose here. But what's interesting to me is that the response included letters between Robert Girardi and the state bar, and I was like, oh, let's see what these two are saying to each other. So Robert Girardi wrote to the state bar and attempted to relinquish Tom Girardi's license to practice law. He actually said he wanted to, quote, tender Tom's resignation from the state bar and relinquish his rights to practice law. It's like, hey, can we just get, like, we don't need to be licensed anymore. Can we just give that back? Will that make you stop investigating him? Because if he's no longer a member of the bar, there's no need to investigate him for disciplinary action, right? Well, the state bar is having literally none of it at this point. I don't know, again, if the state bar is like righteously outraged now that they've seen everything that went down for all these years, or if the LA Times article put a bug in their ass about it. But I imagine if you worked at the state bar and we're seeing all this go down, and the people who were seemingly complicit in this are long gone or retired, you'd be like, seriously, guys? WTF? This is so shady. I'm angry. Something needs to be done. We look horrible here. This is exactly what we're supposed to prevent from happening. This is literally our purpose in life, is to make sure this shit doesn't happen, and it happens. I'd be pissed. I'd be so pissed. Either way, the bar responded, no. Actually, you can't do that.
I just know
there is a proper procedure to resign if you're under investigation, but it includes a detailed written stipulation that then has to be accepted by the Supreme Court of California. So what we're not going to do is go ahead and accept this letter that you sent us saying he'd like to just turn in his law license. Please make it stop. Though if he's given a
really bad
permanent conservatorship,
in fact he does,
it's going to be a little bit harder for the state bar to discipline him because he will be under a conservatorship. There's not much he can't participate in that. There's nothing really he would be able to do at that point. Then,
which means
same day, we're still March 15th. A lot of shit got out. We're still March 15th. A statement of appointed counsel. Now, remember, what we all know from the Britney Spears conservatorship is that Britney doesn't get to hire her own attorney. The court appoints an attorney for the conservatee. And that's what happened in this case. The conservatee's attorney, Tom Girardi's court-appointed attorney, filed his
what if he does have
statement,
they have
essentially, with the court.
He
indicated in the statement that, one, he wasn't going to spill all the tea because he realizes that sharing things that he and Tom Girardi talked about in a court record could potentially impact things going on in other cases because there are so many other cases. So he definitely made note of the fact that there were these other proceedings going on, and he didn't want to put anything on the record in the conservatorship that could impact those. He also said that Girardi was essentially living independently, and I am confusion. And that his daughter drops off dinner and checks on him. He has a housekeeper and groundkeeper and an assistant from the law firm who still helps out. But essentially, he's living independently with no live-in medical help or anything like that. And I'm like,
where people can't. From my experience, I used to be a senior
you're saying, and if he needs a conservatorship, then he can't live independently. The court-appointed attorney pointed out under Probate Code Section 1801, subject to Probate Code 18.3, that, quote, a conservator of the person may be appointed for a person who is unable to provide properly for his or her personal needs for physical health, food, clothing, or shelter, except as provided for by another subsection, and providing that, quote, a conservator of the estate may be appointed for a person who is substantially unable to manage his or her own financial resources or resist fraud or undue influence except as provided for that person as described in subdivision B or C. Substantial inability may not be provided solely by isolated incidents of negligence or imprudence, essentially. But here's the thing. Is he?
Yeah, you have to
and that is the question. Is he, though? If he's living independently with somebody dropping off dinner once a day, is he unable to provide for himself? So there's that. The statement also goes on to say that Girardi was unable to appreciate
they may not be bringing
nature of all of the other legal proceedings.
So a lot of stuff is going to come out.
And that he was unable to kind of grasp the gravity, essentially, of what was happening.
The seriousness of
the
elder abuse.
Court-appointed attorney recommended granting the petition for conservatorship and notes that the objecting parties have remedies outside of the conservatorship proceeding. Now, after that, Edelson PC also objected to the conservatorship on much the same grounds as the state bar, saying, oh, by the way, we were negotiating with him. He was giving speeches. He was giving, teaching MCLEs, continuing legal education courses, and doing all of this other stuff right up until this, and it seems sus to us. Yeah. So we now have 2 objections to the conservatorship, one from the state bar, one from Edelson PC. Later on, the attorneys for the conservator, Robert Girardi, object again on much the same grounds as they did to the state bar, saying you don't have standing here. The point of the conservatorship is to protect him, yada, blah, etc. Then we're going to hop back over to the bankruptcy court. On March 19th, Karen Girardi, the first wife, because Erica Jane is the third wife, there's a middle wife as well. But Karen Girardi filed a motion in objection to the compromise with regard to the Ruy Gomez creditors, saying essentially, by the way, court and trustee, I get $10,000 a month in spousal support, and that hasn't been getting paid. So if you're going to sell all of this property and give these creditors 80% of it, you also have to carve out an allotment for my $10,000 a month, because I'm owed that. Yeah. And oh, by the way, I haven't been getting that, so I'm owed over $70,000 at this point in back payments. It would sure be great if you could go ahead and meet the expectations and the court-ordered spousal support that I am entitled to until Tom Girardi dies. And even then, I have a life insurance policy out on him, so yeah, could you just? So that was the first objection filed.
That's right, she did say that. I remember.
Then came the limited objection of Erica Jane. And I refer to her as Erica Jane just because sometimes it's Erica Girardi, sometimes it's Erica Jane, sometimes it's just Erica. It's easier for me to refer to her as Erica Jane, and she's filing for divorce, so that's what we're going with. We're going with her state name. But she also filed a limited opposition to the motion to approve the compromise.
She wants $600,000.
Claiming a homestead exemption and others. Essentially what this means is Erica's attorneys have gone into the bankruptcy court, the personal one, and said, hey, Erica is still the spouse, right? Because the divorce is frozen. That hasn't been finalized. Right. Erica is still the spouse. And as the spouse, she's entitled to certain exemptions under the bankruptcy code. Now, the exemptions mean monies that go back to the people in bankruptcy and not to the payment of creditors. So her asking for these exemptions to be carved out has not sat well with the public. The PR on this is terrible. The law on this is in her favor. However, the biggest exemption there is the homestead exemption with regard to this Pasadena house. Well, from everything I've looked at in this, it seems that the Pasadena house is not community property in this case. Her name doesn't seem to be on the property. She was not married to Tom when he acquired the property. The property is discussed in the first divorce that took place in the late 80s, the one with Karen, who's asking for her $10,000 a month. And again, no shade to Karen. That's her spousal support agreement. She's legally entitled to it. It's just with everything going on, I mean,
She wants her money, man.
I don't know. I don't know if that's what you choose to do, but it's her legal right to do so. So again, the things sometimes that feel gross and you're like, why would you do that? Still legal. These are legal rights. People are allowed to make this choice. Either way, Erica, the homestead exemption. It'll be interesting for me to see what the court does with this, because that might not be community property. That might just be Tom's property, which means if Tom gets a homestead exemption, it wouldn't necessarily go to Erica. It would go back potentially into depending on the amount, it could end up going back into the bankruptcy for the law firm. If there's $600,000 sitting around that came from the homestead exemption, could the bankruptcy court for the law firm be like, you don't need $600,000 to live on?
In there.
Maybe not. We'll see. But I don't know if that money will go to Erica per se. Because I don't think she has an interest in the home based on the fact that it's not community property. But Tom Girardi has not raised his exemptions yet, and Tom Girardi has not shown up in the bankruptcy court and objected to this compromise asserting his own exemptions. There's still some time for him to do that. I don't know if he will, and him through at this point, through the lawyers for his brother, the conservator. We'll see if they choose to do that or not. Then on March 24th, the trustee in the individual bankruptcy case filed their summary of financial assets and liabilities in court. This is not a complete summary in that there are quite a lot of things that say financial records still under review. So there are still quite a lot of unknowns when it comes to things like jewelry. It's like amount unknown, clothing, amount unknown, collectibles, things like art, amount unknown. Right. But I've watched a lot of Real Housewives and I know some of that shit exists. I want to know how much that Cartier Jaguar ring's worth, right? She said Tom bought it for her. That's community property. I want to know. But none of that is listed here yet. There will be updates to this as it continues going. But the initial financials indicate that the assets are at $74.4 million in assets. No, I didn't misspeak. Yes, I am both ADHD and dyslexic, but that number is that number. 74.4 million in assets. Now, I think this number is a bit skewed, and I will tell you why in a moment. When it came to liabilities, the liabilities stated are $56.8 million in liabilities. Yup. I want to tell you briefly where those assets are coming from and where some of those liabilities are coming from. So the main asset is the home, and the home is listed, well, they're saying they believe the total amount of real estate is worth $17.6 million. And that $17.6 million is coming from the Pasadena property valued at $16.5 million. We'll see. Like, here's why I say we'll see. Right. Because we've seen both like Shane Dawson, Jeffree Star, and others who are selling off their homes during this time in that over $2-3 million range, selling them for less than what they bought them for. I believe even the Westbrook's house. No, the Westbrook's house sold for a little bit more in that lawsuit. When we were looking, the Westbrook's house came up in the Without a Crystal Ball lawsuit. We've talked about it. Either way, most seem to have been selling their houses in that multi-million real estate market for less than they purchased them for just a few years ago. So I'm sure this property has increased in value since it was purchased in, the 70s, I think. But I don't know if that's going to actually sell for $16.5 million. It hasn't been listed yet. When it is listed, I'm sure you will see it in the news cycle, what they list it for. I'm very curious. And then there's another $1.1 million property in Riverside. So that's where that $17.6 million number comes from. Other assets are listed as personal property, but $50 million of that, or 51 million, of that $56 million number is a loan that Tom Girardi allegedly made to his own law firm, Girardi Keys.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, I saw that too.
My mom had a stroke, and the option of living alone was not on the table. So I took her to a long-term care facility. I know without a doubt that my mom is safe. It's very comforting.
I have so many questions. $50 million? He loaned his business $50 million. His business is now in bankruptcy and is not going to pay him back. Yeah. But I don't think that's an asset. I don't think we're collecting on that money. So when I say I think that the assets number is off, I think that $51 million loan is a loss at this point.
It's a big
but
deal to get
it was listed. I have questions. I want to know where the trustee found it. I want to know about the documents. I want to know why in the fuck.
Get one,
what?
Look at
what?
credentials.
$50 million. What? What? I have questions. So that's essentially what makes up the bulk of those assets. And then with regard to the liabilities, the largest liability is the $11 million plus Rui Gomez lien, but there's also a $5 million lien from the Franchise Tax Board. That's California's own tax arm. So if you owe over $5 million in state taxes, I would like to talk to the IRS. IRS, hi, you here yet? When are you coming in? I'm curious what you have to say, because I imagine that the IRS is going, oh shit, if there's any tax liabilities owed, we need to get in on that. So I imagine we'll see if there are any taxes owe the IRS soon, because the IRS, one thing is for certain, they will get their money, or they will try to get their money. So I believe if there is anything to be said, that the IRS will probably come a knocking in this bankruptcy as well, saying, oh, by the way, this is how much is owed to us. Other things of note in these financials, there's a bank account that was identified that has $5 million just chilling in it. So there's that. But then you also have, like, look, the business isn't a separate entity. There's this bank account with $5 million chilling in it. And all hell broke loose in Illinois over what looks like $2 million. Why don't you just pay it? And some of these other debts, there's like a vet bill for like an equine doctor, and gardeners, and the laundry service and shit. Like, why aren't we just paying? You have $5 million in the bank and these bills aren't getting paid. I have questions because, of course, from pulling the credit report, they've listed all of the back payments that are due on the leased cars, which he's not going to be driving because conservatorship, with regard to the lapsed payments, the payment to the Franchise Tax Board, the payment to the vet, the payment to this and to that. But also, the last thing of interest in this form is the schedule of income. And they talk about the current income, which they have listed at $2,958 a month coming from Social Security. So there's the current income, but they also listed income from the last 2 years. We're going to have questions about this as well. Just being nosy, I'm interested to see what else gets filed with regards to these financials, because where the money went has become the question that is most prevalent on my mind. But for the tax year of 2019, the indication from these filings from the bankruptcy trustee, again, who put them together through their own investigation, not with Tom Girardi. Tom Girardi did not file his financials in this bankruptcy case. And at the signature box indicates that there was help gathering information from the conservator, Robert Girardi. But also, Robert Girardi, when he filed to be guardian ad litem, said, look, this is going to take me time because my brother's been very guarded about money. It's very complex, and I don't know where everything is. So for what it's worth, it indicated $34,000 in income from Social Security, $32,000 in income from interest, $10,000 from dividends, and $16.9 million in long-term capital gains, $820,000 in rent royalties or partnership income.
People with dementia.
So,
it's really sad. What
was getting sold for that $16.9 million number in 2019? And where did it go? Did that money get loaned out? I mean, if that money got loaned out to, maybe it's part of the $50 million that got loaned back into the law firm, but if that money got loaned out external to the law firm, the bankruptcy trustee can try to go after those loans getting paid back and sue people. Because the bankruptcy trustee is allowed to sue people. The 2018 year was a little bit different, with $32,000 coming from Social Security, $13,000 coming from interest, $40,000 coming from dividends, and $1.7 million in capital gains, rents or royalties. This $16.9 million in long-term capital gains in 2019 is very curious to me, and I will be interested to see if more information comes out about it. I know there's been lots of conversation about this schedules of assets and liabilities. The trustee did list Erica Girardi as a co-debtor on quite a lot of these debts, saying, look, you're married. These are his debts. These are your debts too, boo-boo. So do I think that the bankruptcy trustee at some point will sue Erica Jane if there's any loans that have been given to her company? Yes. Do I think marital assets and community property will be sold off in this?
They sell this anymore.
Yes. Do I have any thoughts on how much Erica knew?
I got it at Marshall's.
Not yet, but there's a lot here. And I don't know. I really don't know what Erica knew at this point. And as more information comes out, I'm open to change my mind and say, nope, these things indicate to me that she knew. But there's a part of my gut that's just like, look, she was going, if the money still spends, I'm not asking questions. And when Tom and I talk, we talk about light and fluffy things, and he bought me the ring I tracked down, and it's all good. It's all good. I got to fly on the plane. I got to do this. I got to do that. Everything's great. I got to write my book. Tom lets me perform. I don't ask him questions. He doesn't ask me questions. And that's how it works. I'll be very interested to see what she says about it in season 11 of The Real Housewives. The bankruptcy court has filing.
Good plug, Emily.
So many filings. And that's where we're really going to see the most activity, in the bankruptcy courts and in the conservatorship proceeding. The cases in Illinois are going to keep going because there are other attorneys from the Girardi Keese firm involved in those, and discovery motions are ongoing to try to depose those attorneys, see what they knew, see why they didn't say anything to the court if the clients hadn't been paid, etc. So there are other attorneys looped into this, including Tom Girardi's son-in-law, whose last name is Lira. So we will see what happens with regard to the other attorneys in the Illinois Lion Air cases, and I will continue to keep an eye on what's going on in the bankruptcy court. Because week over week, it's a lot happening, and as we learn more through these different filings, I will be here to talk about it with you. I'm very curious to see if an evidentiary hearing and an independent doctor's evaluation is granted based on the objections of Edelson PC and the State Bar of California. I would love to know your thoughts on all of this. It's been a wild ride with this case, just wild. So let me know your thoughts either on social media or in the comments down below. If you have questions about this case, tag me.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Well, that was that, huh? None of this is good, by the way. Because what she's saying is they knew, and when they knew, they continued to spend millions and millions of dollars. In one of the episodes on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, she says, I get an allowance of $40,000 a month. $40,000 a month? Because I knew someone who got $7,000 a month, and she had 3 kids. So that's quite a bit of money. Right? Okay, well, there's my dogs. I don't know if you can see them. I'm going to watch these, but not tonight, because I'm still doing, recording.